Well, we're a couple minutes after 7. I know you all have schedules. I'm Bill Cavers. I'm with the Darien Advisory Commission on Coastal Waters, and AKA the Coastal Commission. You hear me refer to it, or us refer to it as the Coastal Commission. That's the body in town. We're all volunteers that advises the Board of Selectmen on matters concerning the coast and boating activity and safety. We work closely with John Keena, the harbor master, who's here tonight, and he especially takes care of a lot of things for us. Anyway. Got some more people coming in. This is, as far as I know, the first of a kind talk we've had on coastal water quality in Darien and the testing that we do. We think it's a very important topic and wanted to take some time to show you what we've been doing. Before we get into the presentation, I want to express some gratitude and get into some introductions. And first, the gratitude. We've got a couple partners in this endeavor, and the biggest of which, through the longest time of which, has been the Darien Nature Center. Molly Robertson and Angela here. They've just since 2017, we've been using some space in the bottom of the building as a laboratory that we need for our testing. They've given us young volunteers that have helped out on the program on the water. And one of their board members, Dave Sinclair, was a stalwart about going out with us every time he could. And that was most of the season. He was wonderful doing that for 3 or 4 years. And I also want to thank the Darien Land Trust, Elizabeth's here. And they've been wonderful in publicizing the event this year for us. And if you want to talk about a steward of the lands in Darien and the lands comprise the watershed, they're it. And so that's just wonderful to have their backing and support on this. And I also, I forgot to mention something about the Nature Center, which is just so wonderful. In addition to all the support they've given us, they also have a wonderful watershed education program going on with younger people, and that really dovetails with what we're trying to do here, teach people and make them more aware. So now for introductions, we've got a good cast for you. Myself, and then Mindy Chambrelli, who's our Director of Health at Darien. And Julie Jones, who's an ex-chair of the Coastal Commission, and now, very polite crowd, thank you. And now a Vice President of the Darien Land Trust. And then Roberto, who's been a great commissioner on the Coastal Commission, working on this program for several years now. So with that aside, introductions aside, whoops, I probably should be speaking into this. I'm sorry, but can you all hear me nonetheless? Great, okay. Again, I think this is a very important topic, and I don't think it's been addressed in town before, but I want to sort of get a raise of hands. How many people have, sometime in their residency here, gone to a presentation on coastal water quality in Darien? Well, I'm glad that there's been some. I actually myself, besides the Bill Lucy event, couldn't remember any, literally any. And that really surprised me when we're a town which has 3 rivers flow through it and all the beautiful coastline that we do and all the boaters and recreators. So we think this is a very underserved topic. And in a town like Darien, which has a citizenry which obviously cares about the environment, if you look at the Plan of Conservation and Development surveys, and you look at Great Island surveys, we've got a lot of environmentalists out there who want things to be preserved and protected in Darien. And so it's our contention here that a report like this should be happening regularly, and there should be regular discussion about what's happening in our coastal water and its quality. And I think extending into the watershed, how are we treating the watersheds, because that ultimately gets into the center. So this night is focused on coastal water quality. We're not addressing drinking water quality. We're not addressing water in the ground or streams. We're really addressing coastal water quality. And we're going to try to get you out in here in just about an hour. I've already spoken too long. And the parts here that we're going to do a little, I just gave a little intro. We're going to tell you why we test in Darien, why it's important. Then we're going to give an overview of our 2 testing programs. The first one is run by Mindy in the Health Department, Test for Bacteria. The second one tests for more long-term ecological health of our sound. And that's the program that the Coastal Water Commission undertakes. So those are our two main topics, and then we'll have a concluding section and a Q&A of 5 or 10 minutes. So again, hope to get you out of here about an hour, maybe 8:15 at the latest. So let's first get into why we think it's important to test coastal water, the water quality in Darien. This, I think, picture says it all. I mean, that's our Scott Cove and Ziegler's Cove and Fish Islands. But let me get a little more specific. We have a beautiful coast. As I'm probably preaching to the choir here, but we're just about a little under 3 miles from east to west. But when you measure us by doing all the going in the coves and embayments, we're almost 16 miles. It depends how detailed you want to get. I've gotten it out to 18 at one point. Anyways, call it about 16 miles with all the crags. And it's absolutely beautiful. On the upper left is Great Island. There's a reason they acquired it. It's just like a mini Maine coast. The bird life, the fish islands, which you see in the bottom pictures. And then if you've been following, we have had porpoises in the last, or the dolphins, excuse me, in the last a decade showing up here sporadically. Those are from recently this summer off of Long Neck Point. So it's just absolutely wonderful. And if you read Teddy Roosevelt's biographies back in the early 1900s, there were dolphins and whales in the Sound all the time. So it's absolutely beautiful. And that leads, obviously, to we get a lot of recreation out of it. And I will confess to you, that's off Stanford's Cove, but it's still in our Cove Harbor, and a lot of the people were paddling for the Sound, so that's a lot of Darien people joined in that. But we, paddle boarders, the beach activities, incredible at Weird and Weed and Pear Point. We have, in the middle bottom picture, we have public clamming beds that a lot of people don't know about, but we hope will get increased usage with being able to walk to them from Great Island instead of just using a boat. The sailing and the boating is, just immense in our area. And we have a commercial shellfishermen, the freights, that operate in our waters, and others who come in here from Norwalk. So there's a wide variety of activity. But we are not without our vulnerabilities and problems. So Flip Hufford, who was the chair, he's the co-chair of the Coastal Commission now, he was the chair, lone chair for years, took this picture in 2019. He and I had been talking about the algae blooms we had been seeing in the water, and he got a drone up in the air. And I think this was the second algae bloom of that summer. And if you can see the dark, tongues of algae under the water, I remember being on our sailboat and bringing it up to its mooring right about here. Our boat could be one of those in there. And it was a goop just like 6 to 8 inches underwater, and you did not want to touch it. I don't know if it was in particular dangerous, but that's not healthy water. That's caused by over-nutrients, over-rich nutrients, overly warm waters, and that's the thing we're worrying about. There's another couple facts that are going to talk a little more to the scientific reason for us having vulnerability. And this is one that I'm hoping shed some light on our situation. So this is a chart from the US EPA, and it outlines a certain type of watershed. You can have little watersheds, you can have big watersheds, if you will. All the Connecticut River provides a watershed going into the Sound, but then you start to break it up into its little watersheds. So if you break up Darien's watershed in what they call a HUC 12, which is the hydraulic unit code, so that's some EPA technical term, it's that outline you see, that triangle. And then what this US EPA chart does is tell us how much impervious surface cover, how much impervious cover is in our watershed. And impervious cover, just think pavement. Pavement, concrete, the stuff that, buildings are made of, parking lots are made of, asphalt. Rainwater hits it, it has soot on it, it has fertilizers, it has waste, it has carbon from tires, and it all washes into the Sound. That's where it goes. But by just virtue of having a certain level of impervious cover, you have water pollution problems because you have this runoff, this stormwater runoff. If you're at around the 10 or 11% mark, you're going to have adverse effects from stormwater runoff. If you're at the 25% mark, you're going to have harmful effects from stormwater runoff. Darien has an unfortunate situation. This is sort of an odd thing. By the terms of this delineation, this HUC 12, this watershed that the EPA defines, we grab into the borders left and right of Stamford and Norwalk. And so part of Darien's watershed is in urban areas that are have more impervious surface cover than sort of the basic town that you go around in Darien and see. And you can see that because get myself right here. Holly Pond is right here. And so, this is the Darien border. And 5 Mile River is right here. So this is the Darien border. But we're grabbing beyond it into Norwalk and Stamford. So much that Stamford has a 13% impervious surface cover and Norwalk a 17%, lower than ours. So that says that just our basic geography, our topography, if you will, puts us as a more vulnerable community to stormwater runoff. Now, I'll just note one thing. When you're talking about the comparatives, Stamford and Norwalk, their watersheds reach up higher, so they're getting into more undeveloped land. So there is some work how the numbers benefit them as they go up high, and the Darien's keeps low where it's more developed. But on its terms, these are the watersheds of Stamford, Norwalk, and Darien's got the vulnerability. Again, over 25%, and you have a high risk of degrading the water, and it's alarming. Now here's the second unpleasant fact, and I'll try to keep away from unpleasant facts for as much as I can this evening. But all 3 of our rivers are impaired. And that sounds awful, and it doesn't please me. It shouldn't please you. The CTD works with the EPA under the Clean Water Act to assess and classify the rivers that run through a town. It's required to do this by law. It looks at various uses. And so one of the uses is recreation. There's primary contact recreation, which is bathing, and then secondary contact, which would be canoeing or on the beach where your kids might have their feet in the sand. And it determines through bacteria testing and other observational and other science methods whether or not you can support recreation. All 3 of our rivers do not. Then for usage of aquatic life, does the water body support the long-term growth and support of a benthic community, so aquatic life. So this would be seaweed, this would be eelgrass, this would be fish, this would be invertebrates are in the water. And the Goodwise River passes most years, and I think that's because it's a little more of an inlet and less of a freshwater entity coming down, so it has a little more circulation. But the Narone River and 5 Mile River are not passing every year, constantly. These rivers are all on what's called the 303D list that's submitted to EPA for impaired rivers. So why is this bad? We're looking at coastal water quality. Well, these are the rivers that come down and dump fresh water right by our beaches. These are the rivers that are making the water's an estuary where we swim and boat. And so if we're just talking coastal, that's enough of a concern. Let alone back in the communities, the neighborhoods where you have these rivers run through and you might have kids playing in the waters. So that's again another bad fact. I just want to temper this with this fact that there's a lot of impaired rivers in Connecticut. There's a lot of impaired rivers in many states. So every red river here, this is from the, it's 2 years old now, 3 years old, but this is from CTD's impaired list. These are the red rivers are the impaired ones. So we have good company. Where you have people and where you have impervious surface cover, you have impaired rivers. And so it's an unfortunate fact that we've got so much good company. But that should put the context of where Darien is. It's not alone in this. This is a problem with populated areas. And let's see, with that, I think we're going to get to our, there we go, first testing program. And this is Mindy again, and she will explain our bacteria testing that's run by the Health Department.
Thank you, Bill. And I also want to thank you for inviting me today to talk about the town's beach testing program. So in this pie chart here, you'll see over the past 2 decades, Connecticut has seen notable fluctuation in the number of marine closures and advisory days. The closures occur when water quality temporarily falls below state safe standards, typically under heavy rainfall, infrastructure issues, or other environmental concerns. One key trend over this time period is the increased number of preemptive closures due to rainfall. Of note, Darien is on the conservative side of that. We preemptively close with an inch of rainfall within 24 hours. Other coastal communities' thresholds are different. They can be 1.5 inches of rainfall or 2 inches of rainfall, but we're more conservative here. We know rainfall can carry contaminants, as Bill was talking about, from streets, yards, surrounding land into our coastal waters. And for this reason, the states also close shellfishing beds for the exact same reasons. And other issues of recreational advisories before contamination levels rise. So that's just another little fun fact. This precautionary approach protects public health, prevents illness, and safeguards our water, and ensures that shellfish harvested from local waters remain safe. While these preemptive actions are not always the result of confirmed contamination, they reflect an awareness of changing environmental patterns, especially as we experience more frequent and significant rainfalls. So, rainfall is occurring, it's more dramatic than it ever was. If you remember last year in August in 2024, up in the valley, Newtown, Oxford saw 11 and 12 inches of rain, historic rainfall that we've never seen before, the likes of. So overall, Connecticut's long-term trend highlights 2 major messages for the community. One being that our coastal waters are closely monitored and protective measures are taken early to reduce risk. And second, environmental conditions, particularly rainfall, play a growing role in the temporary closures and advisories that we put out. So a little bit of a regulatory background. I thought this was important to cover of our mandated responsibilities in local health. But in Connecticut, the process of monitoring beach water quality is guided by state law. The Connecticut General Statutes gives municipalities the authority to manage and protect public beaches. Under Chapter 98, towns have the power to operate recreational beaches and beach facilities. They also have the authority over regulate to even prohibit swimming when conditions are unsafe. This means local health departments and municipalities are responsible for sampling and monitoring those bacteria levels, which I'm going to get into, and making decisions about when to issue advisories or closures. So DEEP also manages part of that program, which I will get into as well. In Connecticut, beach water monitoring takes place every summer. So we begin the week before Memorial Day and we continue through Labor Day. The state follows established guidelines through the Quality Assurance Project Plan, which specifies how samples must be collected and tested to ensure consistent and reliable results. Sampling locations, also called sampling stations, are determined by the length of the beach. Longer beaches obviously would require more sampling, and in Darien we have 5 stations, 2 at Weed Beach and 3 at Pear Tree. To provide a complete picture of water analysis, we can add additional sampling locations if it's warranted. Each week, our health department staff collect water samples and deliver them to the Stanford Health Department lab, where they're analyzed for bacterial levels. This routine monitoring allows us to make timely decisions and keep our community safe through the beach season. So just for some additional context, this came up in conversation, but our samples are collected by staff wading out in the water in approximately 3 to 4 feet of water. They're using a sterile 125 milliliter bottle that we receive from the laboratory, but the collector removes the cap carefully and in a swooping motion dips into the water into a depth about 12 to 18 inches and keeps the mouth of the container away from their hand to avoid any potential contamination, right? And this is done in a smooth sweeping motion, and then the bottle's inverted and transported on ice to the laboratory. So that's done once a week throughout the summer. The health department also employee while on site is documenting different things about the environment. They are writing down tide schedule. They are looking at Any conditions to observe: bather load, bird activity, rainfall, water clarity, water temperature they're taking, so they're gathering a lot of data when they're there. So we monitor beach water quality. We don't test for every possible germ, and I know that that's a question that's been asked that could make people sick. Instead, we test for indicator organisms, bacteria that signal whether the water may be contaminated, and this is the current standard for all public beaches. For saltwater beaches and marine water, the federal standard uses a bacterium called Intercoccus. It's found in the intestines of humans and animals, and while most species don't cause illness themselves, high levels can indicate that this pathogen is present. Freshwater beaches, the indicator organism is E. coli. To determine whether a beach is safe for swimming, Connecticut follows water quality standards set by DEEP. And I know Bill spoke about their role too. For marine beaches, a single sample with 104 or fewer Intercoccus bacteria per 100 milliliters of water is considered acceptable, so that's our threshold. Over time, we also look at geometric means, which I won't get into all of those details, but there is an algorithm. For freshwater beaches, the limits are 235 or fewer for E. coli bacteria in a single sample. And obviously, if anything exceeds that, that is closure and retesting. So as far as preemptive closures go, to that pie chart that I talked about in the very beginning, sometimes we need to close the beach before we get water samples. And this happens when there is a known contamination event, if we know something has occurred. In those cases, the health department would preemptively closure to protect public health. But we may close if there's a large amount of floating debris, if we're uncertain what it is, even if water quality tests tell us otherwise. For the 2025 season, Darien followed its rain-based standard. When our beaches are closed for 1 inch, again I told you 1 inch in 24-hour period, this condition only occurred twice over this past summer. Importantly, there were no closures this summer due to elevated bacteria level, and waters remained well within acceptable limits throughout the whole summer. The Connecticut Beach Grant, I just wanted to touch a little bit so you can understand how far this goes, and everyone again is using the same sort of standards for testing through a state program. And some health departments actually use a courier system and expedite the testing through the public health lab in Rocky Hill. But we found it more convenient to jump to our neighboring lab and utilize their services, and it's a much quicker turnaround, and we can test when we would like. So the way that the courier system works with the state is that there's certain days they will pick up the sample, and generally I think they stop in Fairfield, which is a little bit of a hike for us on 95, so it's just convenient to go to Stanford Lab for us. But for the Connecticut Beach Grant, Connecticut participates in the Federal Beach Grant Program, which supports water quality monitoring at 73 coastal beaches across the state. These beaches include a total of 133 sampling stations. Each one of them are tested regularly throughout the summer months, and the state is responsible, DEEP is responsible for some of those freshwater bodies, so anything state-owned like a Hammond Acid or Silver Sand, they're out there testing those waters. So the Beach Act passed in 2000 as an amendment to the Clean Water Act, which Bill was touching on, and this creates an improved way to monitor and report pathogens in our recreational waters, and its goal is to protect public by ensuring timely and accurate information about water quality. And in 2005, this last year, Connecticut was awarded a grant of $206,000, and that was to support the monitoring, collection, and the reporting of data. This is one thing that it helped develop for this year. It is a new, it's under development, but it's a modernized map, a beach map, that's going to show real-time closures and advisories. So it's going to streamline the access for the public to gain information and understand what that means. It'll give residents a clearer, more informed picture of where there's closures up and down the shoreline. And this has never been done before. So it's being done in alignment with other local directors of health and in collaboration with the state health department and their subject matter experts. So again, it's this partnership, this is talking among colleagues and leaning into the resources that the state has. So more to come on that. We did enter data in all summer. There was not a press release from the state health department. We were beta testing and working out the quirks. But you know, these flags, if there's any advisories, they will turn yellow, and then the flags will turn red if there's closures. So the 2 instances I told you we preemptively closed, you know, we had to go in and flag our beaches, and then we would obviously turn that back off, that feature in real time. So because everyone's kind of doing this differently, whether they're putting it on their health department website. We have a beach hotline I'm sure most of you know about that I record a message if the beaches are closed. Parks and Recs will put up signage if the beaches are closed for swimming. So this will streamline information. But I do want to conclude with briefly commenting on the last published Save the Sound grading results. They were less than favorable grades, which I'm sure that you've all seen. And there was, you know, it was a wet season, but there is some correlation with weather, although elevated levels are not linked to any single factor. It was most likely the result of several contributing conditions. But, you know, I know we have some Save the Sound folks in here, but if you want to go back and view that historical data, they have data on their website back to 2003. And, you know, the full report is available there, and you can see the algorithm and the dashboards for how they come up with the grading system. But in contrast to last year, I'll just call out that previous seasons have shown really excellent water quality and very low levels of harmful bacteria. So what I'm trying to say is that I don't think a single season is going to predict that long-term trend. And if we did see that, if we did see this trend happening year over year, I think we as a town would need to start discussing how we can look at things differently. Whether it be microbial source tracking to kind of identify any underlying sources. Other communities have done that. There's some studies out there. The methodology is not approved through the EPA, so it's a little bit of a gray area. It is a tool in our toolbox, but it's one that we could explore if we needed. Okay. And thank you.
Okay, Julie and I are going to talk a little bit about what we do and show you. We'll get a little technical. Julie will get a little technical, I'll say that. And then we want to make sure that we leave some time for questions because this is really important and some suggestions we have on ways we can move together. So as Bill talked about, let me just move this forward one. Darien Coastal Commission, we are a participant in the Unified Water Study to monitor ecological health in our coves and harbors, which there are 3, which we'll talk about. I think you saw them on this big, both here on this graph, which is the 3 harbors that we work on, and on that graph, but we'll get into it. The Unified Water Study, it's a community science program. What's that? It's run by Save the Sound, it's supported by the US EPA, and it's used their approved protocol. That's really important. So we're not scientists, but we go and we learn how to use all the tools, of which the sonde is standing straight up there, and I'm happy to show you how it works later. What we do is we go out, we collect the samples after we go through a protocol where we learn how to collect the samples. We go for a full day, so it's been Bill, Sam was part of it, who co-runs a Coastal Commission, Julie and I, we've all been part of this, and we go and we spend some time with Save the Sound, and we learn the techniques they use and how to use that sonde, which is a very expensive, I think that's a $25,000 or $30,000 machine right there. And this for us and for you, it's community science in action. We are literally not scientists, but we are learning, and we use this equipment, as do 29 other groups across the Sound, to go and test. All that data gets compiled, and compiling that community science enables the gathering on a much larger scale than the EPA itself would do without it costing a fortune. And Darien was one of the first participants in the Unified Water Study Program. We were probably the first municipality, as I understand, and now there's 29 other nonprofits and towns that monitor 49 embayments.
Yeah, and, so there have been testing going on in the Sound for many, many years, but there was no uniformity in that testing. And so there was no way to compare the results that were coming back. It was apples to oranges. This is apples to apples. Everybody's going out and they're doing the same thing at the same time. And so that has been really the change in the program, and it's really allowed us to have a data set that really can inform us into the future and is very helpful.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to pull this slide up. Now, you know, this is what we do, but behind us is all this science. I'll just, you know, there are five outlined. UConn is one of the consultants. They're also one of the technical advisors, as you can see toward the bottom of the technical advisory group. But it's Save the Sound that has worked with the US EPA and Connecticut and New York State. So as you can see, we'll get to that that diagram over there. It is Save the Sound. Now, I grew up in Rhode Island. I want to just add this. I grew up in Rhode Island, and Rhode Island was pretty far ahead of everybody with respect to doing this. They had something called Save the Bay, and Save the Bay started about 60 years ago. And there were all these factories in Rhode Island. They have very similar situation where the rivers feed into Narragansett Bay, and they were killing fish. It was just a disaster. So they were one of the first ones. And when I was in high school, I got involved and I started, you know, testing. And my best friend and I actually won the state science fair on doing some of this kind of testing with test tubes. We didn't have one of these sondes. It was, you know, traveling around the state, all over the place. Small state, but a lot of area to cover. And it was old-fashioned. We go and got the tubes, and then we would, you know, do 8 tests on each little test tube, and it was, you know, the whole weekend was spent testing. So it's very, very different. So the point of this is that we have strong science behind us, and that's something we want to make sure you understand. So I'll let
so the
Julie
expertise
take this
is
one.
at the national, the state, and the local level. And we are not scientists, but we have a lot of scientists backing us up. Bill talked a little bit about the Darien Nature Center's involvement, and they've been a partner since the beginning and been very supportive, and they've given us a home for our equipment. Thank you, Molly. We also have had the Darien Boat Club rent us a boat at a very low price. So we take that boat out when we have to go testing, and that's been wonderful. We've had a lot of high school students who have come out with us and been involved in the program. Some of them are up there. I know there's a dad in the audience who I also hijacked one time with when his daughter was coming out to help us when we were short-staffed. The Land Trust has been supportive of promoting this. The Men's Association was very involved a couple of years ago and showed up for it. But I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you. And could you raise your hand if you have been part of our team, whether it's out in the water or on land? I know there's a bunch of you. You guys look around. Yes.
Thank you.
This is community science. This is community working together to volunteer to get this done for Darien and for all of Long Island Sound. So again, thank you everyone for helping us.
And as you can probably see here, we actually have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We definitely have a lot of fun out there. Okay, so this is an example of what we do, and especially when Captain Bill takes the lead. We once had Captain Sam, but he had a couple of other, you know, propeller incidents, so we're not using his boat anymore. So in any event, so the 3 places we test, as Bill alluded to, are cove, which is here, and this is, obviously this is Stanford, but this is where everything feeds into Wheat Beach. This is such a large recreational area. This is counted as one of the 3 embayments that we're responsible for. We typically start literally 1, 2, 3, and then we go here. And to tell you the kinds of days we have, I'm always sending pictures to my wife. What a beautiful day. But Bill and I were out, I guess it was the second to the last time. And we went out, it was about 7 o'clock, and it was a little choppy, it was really cold. And we went out and did our first these 3, and then we motored over to here. And when we got here, the sun really rose. The seas there were probably 2 or 3 foot seas. We did our sampling. By the time we got here, the seas were flat. The sun came up, and it was a magical experience. So we really had a great time out there. And nature is amazing. We're happy to share some pictures if you ever want to look at some of the pictures we have. But it's something we really enjoy. So anyway, Cove is obviously our most popular beach spot in town. Pear Tree Point, it's the busiest boating area. Scott's Cove, which is Ziegler's, and the Fish Islands, and obviously Scott's Cove. And now Great Island is a popular boating destination, and one of the prettiest shorelines. You saw the pictures before. It's Lake Maine there. So all of these are places we go time and time again. We use a GPS, so there's no markings out there. So, we're just trying to get as close as we can to the same spot. That's been the same spot since we started. So I think Bill he really originated this, but he spent a lot of time finding these spots, and we try to make sure we're in the same spot every day. Every single time we go out 12 times a year. So we go out for 6 months from April to October, twice a month, every 2 weeks. We have to go out within the first 3 hours of sunlight. So that might be 4:30 in the morning or it's 7 o'clock in the morning. But either way, it's beautiful out there. We really love it. So
We also test in 9 different spots for macrophytes, i.e. Seaweed. And so we do that over a period of 3 weeks, once a week from the middle of July to the first week of August. And we use it by tossing a rake from the boat, about 2 rake lengths, and then it drops to the bottom.
There was a photo of that, wasn't there?
There is a photo, and we have the rake tosser in the audience. Natalie, tell us. That photo. So you toss the rake out multiple times, and then you slowly bring it in, and you pull it up, and you see what's on the rake. You take pictures, and you send the pictures to
Thank
save
you.
the sound. So that's how we do it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about science of this and what we're looking at. So we start by going to training each spring. Rob, why don't you step up to the sun?
Okay, yeah.
We go to Save a Sound in Larchmont, has an office, and we go for a day-long training, and they train us on the equipment. So this is the sonde, which is, you see the picture,
Yep. So this is the sonde right here.
which we drop into the water, and we drop it down. We test 6 inches below the surface and 6 inches off the bottom in each of the spots. And
Or 18 inches, whatever a foot and a half is.
yes. And so what are we testing for? So here's our list of what we're testing for. So we have our depth, it's to know where we are. We have temperature and salinity, so how much salt there is in the water. And really, those two, temperature and salinity, are really about helping the scientists interpret the other metrics that are below that, the ones that are bolded, which is what our grades are based upon. So dissolved oxygen percentage. So this is saturation, percentage saturation in dissolved oxygen milligrams per liter. And Save a Sound tests for both of these because they reveal different ecological information. So DO percentage saturation tells you whether the ecosystem is behaving normally. And the DO MGL tells you how much oxygen organisms have available to them to live. When all said and done, low dissolved oxygen, DO, equals a stressed ecosystem. So that's the most important thing. Chlorophyll A. So this is really the green you see in algae. So elevated chlorophyll A often indicates eutrophication. And remember this word, I'm going to explain it, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later on, a couple times. It's a process in which excess nutrients, mainly nitrogen and phosphorus, so think about the fertilizer that people are putting on their lawns, enter a water body, triggering dense plant and algae growth, and this depletes oxygen and harms aquatic life. Okay, now turbidity, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because this is also going to crop up later because it's important for Darien. Turbidity refers to how clear or murky the water is because of suspended particles. So think sediment, organic matter, plankton, things like that. Why does it matter? Low turbidity, so the closer we are to clear water, is consistent with healthier embayment conditions. If you have high turbidity, it indicates sediment runoff, dredging, erosion, or stormwater inputs. This also elevated turbidity often correlates with other stressors like nutrient loading, algae blooms, all which mean reduced aquatic habitat quality. And then finally, macrophytes or seaweed. High levels of seaweed indicate nutrient enrichment, again from fertilizers, poor flushing, and potential for low oxygen events. These are all key symptoms of eutrophication in bays and harbors. Now, how to save the sound, take these and come up with a grade for Darien and for the other places on the map up there. So they use the bottom 5 indicators and they weight them equally, and each indicator is compared to specific scientific thresholds that are good, fair, poor ecological conditions. And each indicator produces a numeric score, and when they're combined, you get an overall score A through F, like you had in high school, for each particular embayment. And the embayments are graded differently than the open water in the Sound because they're shallower, they're more enclosed, and more strongly influenced by local runoffs, nutrients, and flushing patterns.
Okay. So I'm gonna refer to a couple things here. So this was outside. I think most of you had a chance. If you'd like, please take one of these. I'll give you, this is a specific report card that came from Save the Sound. And for everyone's reference, these are the different groups that work with Save the Sound. Here's the Town of Darien, okay? Scotts Cove, Darien Harbor, Cove Harbor, and then Bill brought it up here so you can see it a little bit bigger. And it's really important for everyone to understand what these scores mean. Effectively, with Save the Sound, as Julie had talked about, they give us 6 grades, I think, right? It's 6, right? Was it the 6 numbers or 5?
It's 5.
5, okay, so 5 numbers. And you'll see that Darien ended up getting a B in Scotts Cove, a B in Darien Harbor, and Cove Harbor had a B minus. Darien's not used to that. People in Darien don't like Bs. We only like As, right? Now, what you see here, which is important, is this line. This line here is basically Bridgeport and Cross. What's happening here? Well, we know what, Bill referred to the fact that we have so much impervious cover. Darien's in a tough spot. But we're also in a place where we don't have a lot of sound water washing through. This is the most populated part of Connecticut, and it's the most populated part of Long Island. So we are at an enormous disadvantage being in that spot. So
Yeah.
Bs aren't bad.
And this is actually down by New York, which is red. So high population, high pavement, high impervious surface coverage. They're in the red. We're in the intermediate zone.
Yeah, we're in the intermediate zone. Intermediate zone, you would almost say our expectations are for a B. Now, nobody's expectations in this room would be for a B. There's things we can do to continue to improve, but we want to make sure that everyone's aware. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Okay. So just to drill down a little bit on, these are our historical results from 2018 to 2023, which is what's available to us. You can see our B grades here. And you can see sort of we had a dip in 2019. We've had, a good year in 2021. And so this is where we've averaged out. But, it's interesting. You can try to think in your mind what might have caused different events. Why did we have a tough year in 2019? Why was it better in 2021? Does anyone have any thoughts on looking at this? Any thoughts about Darien or what they're seeing up there, or whether these are good or bad?
While you think for a second, I might just add one thing that on the big picture. So this presents the totality of our testing for ecological health. The first year, 2017, was a pilot year, and so you don't see any of the results there. We also didn't have Scott Cove start till 2019. And then Save the Sound is a little behind on 24 and 25, even though we've already given them those results. And to be honest, 22 is a pandemic year they're still trying to catch up on. And so there's a little dash in that line. But this represents all the work we've done to date, and when they come out for their grades next summer, you'll see 2 or 3 more years added to this, and this is the totality of our testing to date. So starting up.
Yeah, I think Save the Sound looks at this and they think B's not so bad where we're at because of the amount of population we have and the amount of impervious surface cover. Like, we wouldn't be able to get to an A without changing some things on the land. So, we're in the same company with our neighbors. We don't have any definitive answer to that. This is science. The gray areas exist. I think some of us may remember there were some very heavy precipitation events, which could have driven a lot of stormwater runoff, which could have caused those grades. But this is a long-term study, and we're going to see trends as this continues and hopefully informs more of what we need to know about our area and what maybe we can do about it.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the things, remember Bill in the very beginning showed this algae bloom. That algae bloom was in 2019.
Yeah.
That was a particularly wet year.
Yeah, I think that was.
So there's probably more runoff. We'll talk about one of the reasons. But these are the things that we're trying to help. We're not the scientists to put it together, but these are things we all notice. You notice when you're out there. You notice how clean the water is. You notice how cool it is. It's
There you go. So we are monitoring the waters, and we're keeping a finger on the pulse of the conditions and producing data needed to identify problems and hopefully solutions. This slide drills down a little deeper on what's beneath those B grades and where our problem areas are. Water clarity, we talked about turbidity. This is water clarity. F, C minus, F, 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 F. That's in all 3 of our harbors, or abatements. And see it again down here, 2023. We don't have the numbers for 22. We don't have 24, 25 yet. But we have consistency here. And we have dissolved oxygen, low dissolved oxygen also. So these are the things that we have identified through the testing. The most likely causes, the water clarity issues, the turbidity issues, are excessive stormwater runoff in our area. Like we talked about, high impervious surface coverage and torrential rain events. So, you know, when Mindy talked about over an inch of rain, think about that. Think about what that's driving. It's not getting absorbed into the soil. It's just ending up in the sound.
So there's bacterial effects, and there's effects on the turbidity of the water,
Yeah.
which is the long-term ecological health of the water.
Yeah. And then the low dissolved oxygen percentage saturation means there's excess nutrients and fertilizers coming off people's lawns, and that's causing hypoxia in our area. So hypoxia, think about if you're at the top of Mount Everest and you can't breathe. That is what our marine life is dealing with. Our fish, everything else is, especially, you know, as it heats up. So July and August, really, when the numbers really drop. You know, I was heading out testing one morning at 6 a.m. and I bumped into my neighbor, Peter Wilson. I don't know. Some of you may know him. He's been in Darien since a very long time. And he told me the story that when he was a kid, he would be fishing in the summertime in Darien waters, and they were clear all summer long. And I think anyone who's been in the water in the summertime now knows they're murky, they're brown. So this isn't just, you know, how it has to be. It can be different if we take different actions. So likely solutions. Noticeable reduction in fertilizer use in town. That would make a huge difference for these grades. If we establish a watershed-based plan for our 3 rivers, if we undertake implementation projects to absorb our stormwater runoff, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, and if we increase low-impact development practices. We all know there's a lot of development in town.
So I'll just get up to conclude. Maybe we'll go back one slide. So I just, like, when you look at our overall grades, those are the, you know, the triple Bs here, not these for them, but these are the overall grades, which are the amalgam of the 5 parameters, you know, the average of them. It is hard to draw a conclusion, right? That's sort of everywhere, right? It's got some high points and low points, and the average is a B. And so we've had a hard time, you know, like thinking, what do we tell you when that's what we've been observing? But that's science, right? And this is a long-term study. So it's important just to give you the data, and as we go along, talk about it. But what Julie and Rob, I think, really did a good job of was explaining, when you dig down on some of the parameters, you know, a couple things come out. And that is the water clarity, turbidity, and the dissolved oxygen. And if you cycle to, you know, what should we all do about this, right? We're going to fix on those 2 parameter problems. So, you know, overall we're a B, but are we satisfied in Darien of being a B? We think we've got a beautiful town. We do have a beautiful town. Coastal environment is part of the great beauty. And so are we satisfied with a B with these 2 problems, which can probably be exacerbated with increased stormwater runoff due to torrential rains and warming waters. So with our vulnerability of being 29% impervious cover, and with the changing climate encompassing more torrential rains, and with more development in town, you can count on there being more stormwater runoff. So I think we're in a bit of a precarious position when it comes to the stormwater runoff, the impervious cover, and the turbidity readings, the water clarity, and the dissolved oxygen. And those are just poor things for our water quality. So what can we do about it? And this is where we'll wrap up, and then we'll take some questions. I think, you know, from our perspective, the town, we want to keep on doing what we're doing. We've got best in quality bacteria testing going on. We are hooked up, even though we're not scientists and perhaps aren't the most eloquent in explaining some of these scientific elements. We are hooked up with the people who are scientists, and both from the national, at state and local levels, we are talking to the right people, and we'll keep those conversations going on. I, for example, belong to the Long Island Sound Partnership, which is the CT Deep and New York State Environmental Commission and US EPA meeting that happens every quarter, and all of the experts get it around the table and talk about what the state-of-the-art methods are to improving water quality. So Again, not a scientist, but I'm hearing from them and I'm talking to them and making sure we're downloading the latest programs. Second thing what we all can do, as you saw with Flip Hufford's drone shot of the algae bloom, we need more observations. So we only go out every 2 weeks, and so what we're doing is periodic. That's still good science, but we need more observations. If any of you see something, please contact one of the numbers there, either Mindy or myself, and I volunteer John Tina's phone number because if it's an emergency, he's the guy to talk to. He's our harbor master. But really, that extra data is tremendously helpful. If we get a bad water quality reading and it's just a one-off, we just can only assume it's a one-off. But if we can tie it to something, that gives us something actionable. So it's just super important.
Yeah, and then spread awareness of Darien and the region's coastal water quality. Sound Health Explorer, this is, Save the Sound has this tool you can go on and you can check out what's going on in the area, in Darien and in the broader area. It's really cool. They just launched it recently. I urge people to get on. The Save the Sound website also has some really great videos about how to improve coastal sustainability. And the Land Trust has actually spent a lot of time thinking about this and just some ideas. I planted a large native garden in my yard, and that helps support. I don't use any fertilizer. I don't use pesticides. I live a block from the water, but we all live near the water in Darien. You saw that watershed picture. We are all adjacent to the Sound. And so if you can build a rain garden that stops your storm water from going into the sewers, that's a huge bonus. If you can change out some of your impermeable surface cover, if you can reduce your fertilizer use, your pesticide use, talk to your neighbors, talk to other people, spread the word, it'll make a difference.
So we'll just leave on these final notes, which again stress the two problems we're seeing with our water quality, and that is the lower water clarity and then low dissolved oxygen. On the left shows pavement and concrete, impervious cover, and how things drain off it into the water. Whatever's hitting it, sitting on it, it's bound to get into the Sound, ultimately with rainstorms. We all can do our part to either reduce its effects or reduce the impervious cover itself. Think of your home and where the water's running off and whether it's being buffered by grass or perhaps you plant a rain garden. Think of some of the town properties and are they doing the right thing in terms of buffering water before it gets into a stream? And think of some of the development we're having in town, of which there's a lot, and are the parking lots properly buffered so that the water running off those is first getting into a rain garden or some bioswale. We all can do our part to do individually look at our own properties and to show up at town meetings at planning and zoning and EPC and voice our concerns if we see something moving through without the proper mitigations.
Yeah, or write an email or write a letter. It helps.
And lastly, Julie mentioned the eutrophication process, which is really key for reducing oxygen in our waters. We do observe in late July and August hypoxic thresholds. That's getting down to stress levels at 5 milligrams per liter and getting down to 3 milligrams. Every time we've gone out in late July and early August, we are approaching those, and sometimes we've gone below those levels. So that happens in Darien. It certainly happens westward of us also. And the cause is warming waters and too much fertilizer coming from all our lawns and the golf courses up the streams, etc. It gets in the water, causes too much algae to grow. It's sort of like this hyper cycle. And then all that algae dies and bacteria starts to eat it, and that eats up the oxygen. That kills fish. We've seen fish kills in Darien. It kills plant life. We don't want it happening, and it's happening increasingly. So these two elements are how we can change some of our water quality ratings, and they can't happen from us just sitting back. We really have to take action. So we wanted to leave you on that note.